You're listening to the Science of CX. My name is Steve Pappas. I'm known for my relentless pursuit of all things customer. Across my career, and also in my 6 startups, I've had to learn how to make decisions in business that customers really respond to. Let's spend some time together and help your business soar, grow, and accelerate, along with my co-host, Angela Simpson. And welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Science of CX. I'm Steve Pappas, your host, and with me I have Angela, as always.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm having a pretty good day so far. How about you?
Great. Doing great. Well, we got a great show today. I've got to tell you a little bit about our guest today. So we've got Bill Albert, PhD. He's the executive director of the Bentley University in Waltham, Massachusetts, the User Experience Center. Bill brings more than 20 years of experience in UX. So that's user experience for our listeners. Research, design, and strategy to his role leading the center. He's got expertise in a lot of areas in qualitative and quantitative user research methods, service design, and user experience strategy. Some of his clients include Philips Healthcare, American Express, ESPN, TD Bank, and many more. So prior to joining Bentley, Bill was the director of user experience at Fidelity Investments. And not only that, to his credit, Bill has published and presented his research in more than 50 national and international conferences and has authored 2 books, one, Measuring the User Experience, and his second one, Beyond the Usability Lab. So again, Bill has been awarded many prestigious fellowships through the University of California at Santa Barbara, as well as all the way to the Japanese government for his research in human factors and spatial cognition. So what we're going to be talking to Bill about today is all around the digital user experience and how that relates to customer experience. So hopefully this is going to be something that all of our listeners will get to enjoy. So let's welcome Bill to the show today. Bill, welcome to it.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, no, this is great. We don't often get to touch upon some of these things on the tech side. And I say the tech side because it's more in the design area when you're designing an experience for prospects and customers in the course of their interactions with companies, right? We talk a lot about the human side of customer experience, but not about the user experience when they're maybe self-servicing, when they're buying online, things of that nature. So maybe what we could do is just to level set for everybody. Let's define user experience versus customer experience, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful place to begin. I see UX, user experience, and CX really as 2 sides of the same coin. Our goals are essentially the same. I mean, we're trying to deliver a great experience. One may be digital, one may be through other platforms, but the end goals are the same, as to provide a great experience for the users and also to achieve business goals for an organization. And the two are furthest away are first cousins, but more likely siblings of one another. A lot of the same research methods, the same underlying principles of UX and CX are really identical. And I think, in fact, if you ask a lot of UX people, they don't take a real narrow view of UX. They think of a user could be a patient at a hospital, or it could be somebody interacting with in a store environment, in a retail setting. So they're not thinking kind of in this very kind of myopic way of, oh, if it's not digital, then it doesn't involve me. So for example, journey mapping, which is extremely powerful tool in a visualization that many CX professional users use, the UX people are using that as well. So it's much closer aligned than I think most people realize.
That's interesting. So is there a different level of detail that goes into the additional journey map portions for UX?
There could be, so for example, if you think about a journey map and different kind of touch points and interactions that a customer has with an organization, and there's a digital piece to that, there might be some more detail around specific pain points or opportunities that could have come from activities like usability testing or information architecture activities, things like that, that are a little bit more digitally focused, but still kind of work their way into a journey map.
Interesting. Interesting. So I guess the two do meet. And as you said, they're very closely related. We've talked a lot about various aspects of customer experience in all industries. We recently had a chat about the curbside takeout experience. But I guess if you think about that one in particular, just to bring an example back to our listeners, if you think about that one, it probably starts with a user experience because it may have begun online, which then became part of the physical real world. So have you gotten involved in those types of things where the experience begins in one channel and then moves to another channel?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's really the crux of it, is that we shouldn't be so focused on the platform, right? If we just look and say, okay, let's make this app or this website or this piece of software usable and engaging, and that's all fine and well. But if other aspects of the experience don't work, if they fall apart, then the whole thing falls apart. So curbside pickup, yeah, I can order my groceries and pick it up, but if once I get to the store and I don't know where to wait in line or what lane to get my car to get into or how I communicate with them in a safe way, then the whole thing falls apart. And it doesn't really matter whether the website was good or not. I might not be going back to that particular store again. So I think, certainly we want to look at each platform, but we need to see how they connect with one another. Right.
I think that's an excellent point, Bill. One of the things that I've observed in increasing my utilization of online tools during quarantine was realizing that some places have done a better job than others at really preparing for that transition from the online to the in-person. What have you seen in your research on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in that sometimes in my own personal experience, I'll be using an app or a website and it'll be great. And then I'll switch channels. I'll pick up the phone and call for some reason, or I'll print out some form and I see it's completely not consistent, confusing, really a poor experience. And I think, boy, I'll bet you these were different teams working on this, and there wasn't any kind of coordination between the teams, and there wasn't anyone at a higher level within an organization making sure everything kind of works seamlessly, right? There probably isn't a CXO in that organization who can kind of see how all these pieces fit together. So my experience is that most organizations are very much in the weeds, and they'll say, hey, let's fix the website or the app on just this one thing, maybe this one use case or these couple personas. And then they'll sort of pat themselves on the back and say, okay, job well done. And they're not looking at the end-to-end experience. And that's a really big missed opportunity because, as we know, customers, that's their view. It's the end-to-end experience is the experience. It's not just digital.
Oh, I'll tell you, the place we've seen the worst of that with my husband and I lately, doing a lot more working out, getting healthy. Mm-hmm. And we've found for the particular piece of equipment that we use that the website, the tablet on the machine, and the app all search for workouts completely differently.
Wow.
So if I want to search by my favorite trainer, I have to run downstairs and look for it on the piece of equipment because I can't successfully do it on the website. So I think it's a great point you made that it's probably separate teams working on each different area of interaction, but they don't have that unifying role above them, making sure they're making that consistent experience.
Right, and furthermore, what they're probably not doing is looking at that end-to-end experience from the perspective of, this persona with this use case, right? I've done some teaching around service design and some work in related to airline industry, and the airlines are really interested in this because if you think about everything that goes into that, from the websites to the app to the airport experience to being actually on a flight, it hits every single channel multiple times, right? And you really have to see where the particular pain points are, why for each persona, each use case, in order to actually address it. It's hard work. It's really hard work, but it's the only way to make improvements that really matter.
Well, the airline industry, as you bring up, is one near and dear to my heart. Years ago, a million years ago, in a previous lifetime, I owned my own charter airline. And, we found back then, unfortunately, we didn't have all of the digital things necessary. But, the one thing that we did really well in our planning was we created a step-by-step method whereby every traveler knew exactly what was going to happen, what to do every step of the way. And I don't know if you remember when we used to have paper tickets, there used to be, they were maybe 3.5 inches by 8 inches wide. We used to create a whole stack of those. And it was every step of the journey from when they're packing. We gave them directions. We gave them hints and tips to pack. We gave them a luggage tag right there. It was a big, thick piece, but they could take the luggage tag out. They put the attachment on. And then the next one was their ticket for the airport shuttle. From the airport shuttle, where they had to go, which gate, not which gate, but which desk they had to go check in at. From there, what was available in the airport for them to eat or drink if necessary while they were waiting, down to what happens on the flight, who's going to be traveling with them, because in our charter, we used to have host and hostesses on every flight. And they had, back then, we didn't have iPads, so we had coloring books for the kids. We had things for the parents to do. We had crossword puzzles. We had all kinds of things for them too. And right down to when they returned back to their home from that. So we tried to approximate a end-to-end journey, but so that nothing was left to chance, right? So that they never had a question. But I've been in software now for 37 years, too. And I remember 20 years ago and beyond, we used to design our software differently. We planned out everything, the packaging, the tech support, everything. Open this first. Remember the famous open this first pamphlet we had. So I guess the design is really what I'm getting at, is the design and the planning of this is extremely important. Maybe when you're starting out a company, maybe as it's starting up, or you're creating a new product or a new service, but retrofitting companies, might have other challenges to them. How do you kind of go backwards and say to a company that, okay, you're in the mess now, but here's how you got to start looking at it. And I know this may veer us off a little bit, but a lot of our listeners are running companies. They're executives in companies, or they're in management in companies, and they're probably hearing a lot of this and saying, okay, but how do I do this? What can I do? Because, the horse has already left the barn. Now we've got to figure out how do we address it. So maybe any recommendations of where people should start?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful place to begin. Is it's really important that a company understands what's going on right now. Sometimes we'll refer to that as ground truth. What is happening on the ground? What is the reality? And the best way to do that, at least I understand, I mean, kind of COVID aside for a moment, is field research, to sit down with people, to understand what are you doing, to be able to observe their behaviors, to be able to talk to them at depth and understand their motivations and their barriers to use, and to really get into the psyche, the mind of the customer, and understand the current experience as best you can. And through that is taking all that data, piecing it together to identify what are the biggest pain points along that journey, right? What's working well and what isn't, and why, and then what do we do about it, right? Coming up with an action plan, a series of projects, et cetera, looking for missing pieces of data. I'm a firm believer in utilizing both qualitative and quantitative research methods, and to see what data is missing, what don't we know, right? If we're looking at the airport experience, maybe we know the end-to-end experience for somebody who is a business traveler, but what about somebody who doesn't speak English? How are they going to get through the airport, right? What is their experience like? Do we anticipate their needs just like we do the business traveler or the single parent with two little kids, right? The needs are different. The perspectives are different, and let's gather the data that is what we have, see what's missing, identify pain points, and then again, see what the opportunities are. So I think doing field research, baseline testing, baseline evaluations is always probably the single best place to begin that sort of transformation or that process.
That's great. That's great. So I think in one of your talks, you were discussing creating better experiences by thinking about the prospects and the customer's emotions. Can you tell us more about how you figured this out, and how is that really beneficial for folks today to be thinking about?
Sure. So in UX, and for a long time, people called it usability. Our goal was pretty simple, to make whatever products or systems easy to use. And that was a fine goal. And in fact, decades ago, things were really horrible. The design was poor. People really struggled and had difficulty. And that still happens to a certain extent now. But the conversation has kind of shifted in the last few years, where a lot of companies, what they're doing from a design perspective is pretty good. They're able to design for ease of use, but what they want to do is create an app, a piece of software, a product that is engaging. So we need to kind of take another perspective on it and say, all right, what are the emotions that you're designing for, and how do we measure the extent of those emotions? So the study that you're referring to is something I did with a colleague on virtual dressing rooms. And virtual dressing rooms are fairly new technology that allows you to enter in different body dimensions and then try on clothes on kind of an avatar that sort of simulates what your body might look like. And we chose this for two reasons. One is that we wanted to have new technology that there's a lot of issues around data privacy and also around body image. And so we actually ran a study with, I think, 10 women, and we brought them into our lab, and we had them use 3 different kind of websites that deal with these virtual dressing rooms, and we measured their emotions different ways. So we asked them questions like survey questions, but we also used eye tracking to see what was visually engaging. We used GSR, galvanic skin response, which are little sensors worn at the tips of your fingers that measure basically arousal or excitement. And the third was facial expression analysis. So we use something called the iMotions platform that kind of integrates the eye tracking, the GSR, and facial expression analysis. And we looked at emotions like engagement and joy. Let's see, what were some? Disgust, contempt, all that have very different facial expressions. And what we found was of the three, when we only looked at kind of our qualitative measures, the three sites really weren't performing that differently from one another. People thought, okay, these are fine, I like them. But when we overlaid the biometrics, we found a very different story. Two of the sites performed much better than the third site. One site wasn't nearly as engaging, and the joy or the smiles were much less on it. So we really came kind of with very different insights when we kind of integrated the biometrics into our normal kind of traditional user research methods. So that was kind of a really cool, interesting study, interesting finding, and I've been presenting that at some conferences. And it really is just kind of a way to illustrate how important it is to kind of triangulate, to bring in different data sources into answering really fundamental user research questions. In this case, what is the emotional experience like, and how can we accurately measure it?
Yeah, and it sounds like there's some great research in there in doing that. I mean, are there other cues or clues, I guess, that when you do your research with potential customers or prospects, are there things that maybe our listeners that may be running small or medium-sized businesses, they may not be able to, have the GSR or the eye tracking, but, are there ways to survey that don't necessarily have the technology in place, but can figure out whether or not one thing is better than another for them, or one gets a better response, or because today, it's a very email centric world. I mean, a lot of our listeners are probably sending out emails to try and generate leads, and they're probably not doing the level of A/B testing or the levels of tests that they should do to determine subject lines and things like that. But in many businesses, I would imagine there's probably like a stage or a pyramid. Some of the technology that you mentioned may be at the top of the pyramid, but are there things that our listeners could take away and maybe put into action fairly easily?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple things that are a very kind of easy lift. I mean, certainly doing an online survey. Online surveys you can incorporate images into. You can get basic feedback. You can get things that are probably some pretty reliable metrics. The one kind of limited thing is the level of interaction. There are tools like a User Zoom or Loop 11, Userlytics that allow you to look at kind of basically gauging, letting people interact with the system and getting their feedback on that systems. But if it's not interactive, certainly using an online survey tool like Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, etc., are lovely. The other thing is in-depth interviews. It's just setting up a small sample of in-depth interviews to be able to sort of hone in or pinpoint, understand better some of the results that you see through kind of larger scale surveys. So those are kind of two, basically surveys, in-depth interviews is a wonderful place to start and to really try to understand kind of the emotional aspects, of any experience.
That sounds good. I think Angela and I probably both have a lot of experience in turning to our contact centers to get focus group type information, because they're on the front line and they're hearing the issues, the concerns, the problems, product issues, delays, whatever. They're hearing it day in and day out. And I mean, I've always been an advocate for having the executives of an organization sit in a contact center as much as they could to really hear from the customer or the prospect's side, but also because those agents that we have are a type of focus group in itself. I mean, is that, have you ever come across using that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've done double jacking before, and it's so enlightening. I can't tell you. People, it's real people with real problems. There's nothing fake about it. And I think that everybody should, especially senior management, needs to be listening into some of these calls, being part of it. To the extent that you're removed, puts you at risk for being out of touch with what's really going on. And it's not just about understanding problems, but it's coming up with or developing new ideas. One thing that really, years ago, I was at a conference and the CEO of Intuit was speaking, and he said, all of our best ideas came through field research. He said, I can remember when we went to this guy's house and we were in his basement and we saw all the Post-its around his computer and what he was trying to do. We got back to the car and we came up with the idea of QuickBooks. Like, I remember, and he's like going on with this story, and that's like, wow, it just takes one of those things. So people need to put themselves in the position to be innovative, to come up with new ideas. And the best way, in my opinion, to do that is to put yourself in touch with real people who are using your product or would be wanting to use a product like yours or service.
Bill, today is actually my last day of my first research class in grad school, and I have learned about the concept of generalizability. Mm-hmm. So what have you learned in the user experience that our customers can take regardless of the industry that they are in to get that joy moment in their user experience? So
one of the truths that I have learned, and I see it all the time, is in UX specifically, but also in CX, the devil is in the details. It is the small things that matter. And you need to be looking at all the small things because they matter a lot. Just to draw kind of an example, around the virtual dressing rooms, one of the websites had the avatar in a shape that many people would consider to be a very unrealistic body shape. And women were very upset to see this. We saw things like disgust and contempt peak when they first saw this essentially this body.
Okay.
Right? And I had, I wouldn't have seen that, but it was the little things like that. Just the shape of that one body really turned people off from this one website. And so it is that is a real kind of generalizable finding that cuts across almost everything. But there's a lot of things, a lot of kind of principles around ease of use, for example, where people don't, no one ever complains when something is too easy to use, with the exception of gaming. But other than that, people want things to be easy to use. So I'm not sure I answered your question fully, but I tried.
I appreciate your insights.
Well, this has been great, Bill. That brings us right to the end of our time. And I'm going to ask one more quick question. I'd be remiss for our listeners if I didn't ask about bots and how chat bots are starting to factor into the UX as well as the general usability out there and factored into the journeys that we're all talking about.
Yeah, chatbots are really interesting. We actually did work for a client on chatbots, and we presented them different versions to see how they would kind of react. And there was some kind of basic lessons we learned, like around, if it's a real, if I guess a chat by definition a bot would be using some form of AI, is that it's very clear that it's AI, and also that, for example, if you're talking to a real human, you need to know that it's a real person. But there's something very specific about the tone and the language used that, speaking about kind of the devil is in the details, little words here and there make a big difference in terms of the perceived value and use, right? And allowing people to certainly engage with a chatbot, but also not engage, to be able to find other sources, other resources. So it's a huge area for UX right now. It just needs to be extremely well thought out and tested with real people and real use cases. People who, if it's voice related, that English is not their first language. It needs to be accessible. A whole bunch of different kind of use cases that need to be kind of looked at in the context of a chatbot.
Perfect. A great area for us to end on. So, Bill, thank you very much for your time today. This has been quite enlightening and an area that we have not been able to go down. So I'm glad we got the chance to sit down with you and learn more about the UX and CX intersections. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Angela. Great talking to you too.
Good to talk to both of you today.
All right, everyone. Take care. That's it for us. Here's another episode of The Science of CX in the can. Till the next time, I'm Steve Pappas, your host. Take care, everyone. You've been listening to The Science of CX. My name is Steve Pappas. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, the highest compliment that you can give us is to subscribe, rate, and review The Science of CX. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Panviva has 25 years of empowering customer service, and we have deep expertise in how people actually use information, from our roots in learning and performance. We offer accurate, consistent information on demand to every channel. Most relevant knowledge at your people's exact moment of need. Integrated, streamlined internal processes. Systems that deliver memorable and remarkable customer experiences that boost customer retention and loyalty every time. Knowledge that extends across your entire digital landscape. To learn more, visit Panviva at www.panviva.com.